So wait there, Omnes, I am Rubus, and today we're doing a gameplay review for the Goose Game, Untitled Goose Game. The Goose Game has a very simple plot. You be a goose. That's really pretty much it. I mean, there's really not much else to say. It's just goose it up. Just be goose. So just like in real life, this goose is a right punk who wants to attack people and cause PTSD for Giver McElroy. I don't know why they included him in the game, but that poor boy, that poor little baby boy. The game will give a list of crimes to commit and terrorize each area. The people will only react when the character is actively causing problems. The setting is in some UK-looking village, I suppose. There's a pub, a street vendor, a neighborhood, and a farm. It seems very bare bones, but it seems like they based it off the UK, and some of the language shows that it's probably either in the it's UK English somewhere. It seems to be what it is. I could be completely wrong, and maybe I'm just being stupid. The areas are all connected by gates that the player can unlock after getting into the next area. Based on how no one reacts to the goose roaming the streets, it seems as if this goose has done this frequently and has broken everybody's spirits down to nothing. Just grinded them into absolutely sawdust. The purpose of this game is to goose it up, cause problems for people, hide things, lock people in garages, you know, typical goose shenanigans. The humans are trying to go about their day, and that is unacceptable for a goose on the loose. The time to complete this game will take about 3 to 4 hours to beat on the first go. The to-do list is pretty clear about what to do, but how to complete certain things gets a little more obscure as the game goes on, so it will take some trial and error towards the latter half of the game. There are also some secret tasks and a speedrun trial for after completing the main game to give a little extra endgame bonus stuff. For gameplay aspects, the game controls pretty consistently. The goose will respond to inputs when pressed and will move when asked. I did not find or have any issue where pressing the button did not result in the correct action, although there were some times, but that wasn't necessarily the control, it was more the mechanic, which I'll get into in a moment. For precision control, the player can cancel or repeat actions perpetually. The goose will pick up and drop items constantly, just like they do in the military. We gotta pick them up or put them down. And the devil bird will sprint or walk. There are no limitations to activating, stopping, or changing your actions. For latency control, there is no latency built in or apparent within the game. The game allows the player the precision to cancel actions, but then also allows them to repeat them immediately. The player can spam the run or grab controls and the goose will listen, which is a little unrealistic because geese don't listen to anything but themselves because they're bastard birds. There are no required frames or recharges for actions that are perceptible. For frequency control, the game has tasks in each area that will require the use of grabbing, running, walking, and dropping things. Honking is useful, especially as a distraction, but most of the game can be played entirely without it, and the come at me bro stance with the wings is only ever required once, and I'm not really sure what the purpose it serves other than to just have the option to take up the entire road like a goose actually would in real life. I hate geese. They are thugs of the duck world. Swans are wolves who want to be left alone, but will attack a human if they get close. But geese are just thugs. They just want to attack. They're like wasps. They do nothing besides cause problems. For utility control, each action, except for the wingspan, is useful throughout the entire game. The game is clearly built around using each action with purpose. Running makes too much noise, but honking can be good for distracting someone just enough to prevent them from finding your stash of sandwiches. Areas can be beat with speed and force or slow methodical planning, whichever you decide that you want to do. For autonomy control, the game will give full autonomy over the player's actions, but will limit the player to complete each area before moving on to the next. The player must complete all but one task to move on, which forces the player to investigate and try everything that's available to them. I think increasing it to 2 items in the list would be better to allow the player a little more choice and ignoring the more time-consuming or things that they can't necessarily figure out. For movement and speed, the duck will move fast enough at a sprint to get through the beginning to the end of an area within about a minute or so. It doesn't take too much time to cross an area, nor does it take too much time to transition between the areas. The game also has plenty of gates to unlock to more readily and quickly access the areas from anywhere. The movement is a little more realistic, where the goose will need to take a few steps to turn around, rather than just shifting the body immediately. This can cause a few issues when hitting a corner, where the character is just stuck on something, or trying to escape a chasing person because the character takes too wide of a turn to get into a hidey hole. Generally, the movement is fine, but in tight spaces or in the races, it can become an issue. For view and camera, the camera has a static 3D fixed on the character, although will shift focus when a human is nearby, and the view gives about 1.5 meters or a 5-foot radius. The view is enough to see the immediate area, give enough time to escape if a human is chasing, and the opportunity to plot and scheme. There are buttons to pan the camera out and give about 25% more visual, but it doesn't work everywhere, and the static camera forces, sometimes, the extended view backwards, it recedes the camera back, and in some areas. It's not always clear, but usually it's in tight corners. Obviously, it pans the camera back in, and it kind of reduces the camera view. It can lead to some issues where you're trying to plan or sneak around the humans because the camera will sometimes not stay extended. There is an option to change the camera to focus only on the goose, which can help prevent the camera from moving out of the view where the player actually wants it to be. For growth, the game grows in terms of obscurity in the tasks throughout the game. The amount of tasks is about the same per level, but how to do the task becomes a little less clear with each area. Each area grows with more punishments for getting caught, and will have more than one person to stop the character's shenanigans. The growth overall is perfect for the game, the ridiculous nature is always there, but the challenges start to increase in each new place. The flow of the game is pretty linear and steady. Go to a new area, get a list of tasks, cause havoc and ruin the lives of innocent people, move on to the next group. The flow will slow down a bit for each area as the tasks get a little harder to decode in terms of how to do them, but the flow is enough to keep the attention of the player without overwhelming or boring them. The last area has a slower flow and can be a problem as 2 tasks require waiting for the humans to get into the position, and messing up will take about 2 minutes to reset everything, and it can become a chore to redo this if you mess up once or twice. The areas are all about the same size or time to get around, which is nice as making the levels bigger would just be frustration to navigate. The final level suddenly shifts to be unlike the others, although uses the same controls and limitations and provides an interesting change of pace to the game, so although the last level is a little bit different, I don't find that it has any issue. It's fine. The game is hardly difficult in the common sense. The challenges are the speedruns and the very obscure tasks, as some secret tasks will require getting items from other areas, but it is unclear what items will be needed sometimes. When the character is called goosing it up, the NPCs will reset the item that they notice, and they will also reset any items that they notice that are out of place around them. At first, this is generally not a problem, but the later tasks require multiple items or steps, and the more people in the later areas reset the items faster. The game's difficulty is fair and standard. It's not too punishing for losing, but it offers the risk versus reward when you're moving quickly. If you move fast, you can get it done fast, but there's a more likely chance that you'll get caught. If you're slower, it'll take more time, but there's a less likely chance. The humans move slightly faster than the character, so just running and goosing it up will not be enough to win. Oftentimes, you will have to slow down and be a little more planning and methodical when you play the game. There are some situations where the goose has to wait on others to finish animations, but causes frustration when others catch the goose with items well outside the view or area the NPCs notice, who then take the item just before completing a task. It doesn't happen all the time, but it did happen a few times that it became frustrating and was like, why do you notice me? How in the world did you notice me halfway across the map, and now, at the pivotal moment, you have taken away the thing? The game is pretty sustainable from the start to end. The tasks can be completed quickly enough, there is enough growth and steady flow to make it interesting. The game doesn't overstay its welcome or ask the player too much at one time. The secret task and speedrun tasks give the player more to do after beating the game, and at a level of difficulty that really wasn't present during the main game. The game is fun and engaging from start to end, and is fun in the end game or replays, although immediate replays don't really offer much than personal challenges, like never getting caught, and the entire speedrun of the game, but the game is open enough to allow these personal things that you can set your own challenges for if you want. The story is that the player is meant to be a shitbird the entire game. That's pretty much it. It's meant to be ridiculous, and it's shown pretty early on and repeated that this goose constantly terrorizes this village. They have pre-made no goose signs everywhere. I am infamous. Other than that, there is no real story, and the game doesn't really need one. It's supposed to be a fun, lighthearted look into the vicious world of geese, and that's it. The game has plenty of sounds that match their realistic counterparts. Bells sound high-pitched, the sprinklers sound like water, the goose's footsteps sound like wet slaps but bring the fear of devastation into the hearts of all who hear it. The music is odd, using a piano for the most of it, but it matches the theme of the game. The music is often a bombastic piano when the goose is up to some shit, or is running at turbo speed ready to call some shit. The music is only present during the shenanigans, and is completely silent except for the sound effects during walking movements. I think the game works fine without the music, since there are constant sound effects due to the goose being an incessant menace to the Stockholm-Syndrome humans who have unfortunately accepted their fate as the goose's playthings. The mechanics in the game are typically reliable. Each area will have about 8 tasks, some will require gathering, some will require some thought, others will be directly told to them. The goose will feel unfulfilled and won't move on to terrorize the next group unless most of his mischief is completed in the current area. There are gates and shortcuts to connect the pathways to make travel easier. The humans will ignore the goose unless prodded, except for the bouncer, and any items stolen will be reset if caught. The mechanic I had the most trouble with was telling Goosey to pick up certain items. When items were close to each other, the goose would pick up the wrong item sometimes, and I would drop it, but then he would pick it up again. Although I am unsure if this was planned so the goose would frustrate me just like I'm frustrating everybody else, it became a problem in the speedruns or the timed tasks where a human would catch me and I'd be fumbling around trying to grab a specific item like a stupid duck. I am a goose and beyond such foolish acts. I also had issues where sometimes the prompt to pick up an item would not appear even though I'm circling it and desperately swinging my stupid long neck at it. This was rare but happened enough to be a problem. The game offers some manipulative mechanics for accessibility for the player, but nothing for the game. The player can change the camera focus, the toggle hold options, and the layout of the controller. Some of these don't directly influence the gameplay, but do offer the player better control over the game, which can help them control the player. The character can be dressed in a bow, but that offers no change to the gameplay other than look dashing. The game offers a few assistive mechanics where there are gates that can be unlocked after beating a certain area to create shortcuts and escape routes from the chasing humans. When humans catch the goose messing with things, they will reset the stage, but honking and messing with other things will distract them while they are fixing things. Humans refuse to chase the goose into small areas, giving an option to hide the item or lose the human, who apparently have the attention span and pertinacity of a squirrel since they give up immediately after the goose escapes. There are a few detrimental mechanics, some that are particular to certain areas. The humans are always faster and stronger than the goose, so getting caught early will require some maneuvers. Humans are also stronger than the goose since they have solid bones like some uncultured fiends, and so they can force the goose out of certain areas or just grab items quickly. One area has a gate that is reset by one human constantly, blocking off an easy return and forcing the player to be faster or more obnoxious. And the final challenge area has a bouncer who forces the player to find a method to sneak into the area but can get kicked out if not paying attention. The game offers a few guiding mechanics that are also mostly assistive in nature. The humans will have a Sims-like thought bubble next to their head to signify what they plan to do. If the player sees the bubble contains an item that they need, they know to distract or bother the human until they can hide that item better. The humans will make a sharp noise and start running if they're about to cook the goose, but return to a saunter when their rage has subsided after giving the goose a stern talking to. Items will show a small semicircle flashing lines to signify that the character can pick that item up if the button is pressed, and larger lines will appear to show that the character can do special animations. The pathways between levels are all linear and narrow with markings on the ground for directions, making navigation easy. The game has a fair bit of intuitive mechanics. The controls are all told to the player directly, but all the assistive, detrimental, and guiding mechanics the player must figure out. The intuitive mechanics are easy to figure out and nothing is really obscure, especially after a specific event happens a few times. The game has a few thematic mechanics. The farmer is the least focused on the goose as the crops are the most important to him. The boy is terrified, rightly, of the criminal bird, and the shopkeeper will immediately evict the bird. All the other humans interact in a similar manner according to their area and the kind of thing that they're doing around. All the items reflect the theme of the area and the tasks often involve what would bother the person the most realistically, although the newspaper man puts his sandals on after they were soaked, and that is heinous. Therefore, the goose is absolved of all crimes against this heathen. Otherwise, there are no thematic or logical reasons why the goose is allowed to rampage, or that the people don't keep their items higher out of reach. This doesn't disparage the game, as it shows from the first second that the game is not taking itself seriously. The game's color and presentation are clear enough to make everything easy to tell apart. There are not many details, but it's easy to view the area and immediately understand what is happening. There is no hub or map, but the game is linear enough that this doesn't really hinder the experience. The UI for menus is pretty simple. The text is big enough and legible, there is enough spacing and kerning to not cause issues with understanding the to-do list, the menu is pretty bare bones with a few options, and the text here is print, probably Arial, that's what it looks like. Again, it's legible, easy to navigate, and everything makes sense. The options are all in one menu selection, and nothing seems out of place. The game has low poly graphics but with an interesting art style of a comic book-like appearance, and heavy color saturation. The lighting appears to be uniform and so there are no real shadows, and it gives a bright, fake look. Even though the graphics are low and the colors are heavy, there's enough detail to easily tell what the objects are, where the characters are moving, where they're looking at, all that sorts of stuff. It surprises me how a game without shadow can make things look 3D, or even curved, but there is a reason that no one hires me for art. It's because I suck at it. The humans have no facial features besides a nose, but the game doesn't really need them to show that they hate the goose, as that is naturally ingrained in us from birth. The animations are clean and smooth, although simplistic. The humans don't curve their hips, dip their shoulders, or do any minute movements that are more realistic, but they move realistically enough to not be jarring. The humans also have no fingers, so picking up and moving things is held in their orbs, but again fits the theme and mood of the game well. Despite the graphical and model limitations, the animations of the goose and humans are good enough to not be jarring, odd, or within the uncanny valley. The game is generally accessible to most players. The script text could be a problem for anybody who struggles with a lexical comprehension, but there is an option to change the form from cursive to plain, and although Arial is not perfect for dyslexia, it should be suitable enough since the game pauses when the to-do list is activated. The text is big enough to be legible for most people, and I can't imagine that those with visual impairment would struggle too much. The colors are highly saturated, but also highly different for each area and object, so it's easy to tell apart the foreground, the background, interactable items, and such, even for those who struggle with colors or perception. There is an option for the camera to focus on the goose only, which can help prevent the strange shifts and movement that could potentially cause issues with vertigo or some sort of dizziness. There are also options to toggle the actions from holding a button to press the button, which is very nice for those with arthritis, carpal tunnel, Parkinson's, or any similar mobility or gripping issue. The game also allows the player to completely change the control scheme. I don't know why we still have games that refuse this, but it's actually incredibly helpful not only in terms of accessibility, but autonomy. Let me choose my buttons. I don't understand why you force me to do it the way you want me to. Let me choose what is best for my hands, and I can enjoy the game better. Just let me do my hand thing. So for a final review of the game, overall I give the gameplay a 30 out of 35. There are some issues that it had, but it's not too terrible. The story is a 3 out of 5. The story doesn't really exist, but there's enough there that you can make up your own story. It's got enough pieces there. The sound is a 5 out of 5. I didn't really find an issue there. There could be a little more sound effects or music, but I didn't really have a problem with it. For mechanics, I gave it 33 out of 35. There were some issues with, again, me being able to grab some things, the speed runs and all that stuff, but it wasn't really prevalent or too frequent to really be an issue. For the tutorial, I gave a 5 out of 5, since it's at the last minute, doesn't take away autonomy, it's not really obtrusive, it doesn't really get in the way. For user interface and user experience, I gave a 5 out of 5. The foreground, the background, all the areas, the scenery, what you can interact with is easy to tell apart, and the menus are very sensible, organized, and it's easy to navigate. For accessibility, I gave a 5 out of 5. Although this game doesn't go above and beyond, it gives enough options for certain actions that help people around with, visual impairments, for dyslexia, for any mobility or gripping issues as well. And I really like that. For a game that, you be holding buttons down a long time to run, some people just want to press the button instead of holding it. Overall, I give this game a 5 out of 5. This is the first game I reviewed that I can recommend to practically any gamer. Whether you play games seldom or all the time, this goofy adventure is a nice way to sit, relax, and torment humans. Although the story and music are not really anything memorable, or even existent, the joy of the game comes from the gameplay, which is varied, challenging, humorous, and simple enough that everybody can enjoy it. It's short enough to not become a burden, and is just a fun adventure to have. There is a 2-player mode that I've never played, so I can't really comment or review it in any manner whatsoever, but it does seem fun to terrorize you with your friends, so maybe give it a shot and see what happens. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review of the game. If you have any constructive criticism, anything you think that I missed, anything that you think that I'm wrong on, please leave it in the comment section below. If you also have any games that are similar to this that you think that, would match the style and theme that I would also enjoy, and maybe they do it better, maybe they do it worse than the Goose Game did, who knows. Also leave those in the comments and please let me know, because I'll be happy to play any game similar to this one. Thanks everybody for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Walete, omnes.